So last week, as I introduced another theme for until the end of next week, anyway, based on Marcus Borg's book, Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time, we talked about the encounter of Jesus with the Syrian woman. And following the service last week, somebody came up to me and said, "I can't believe that Jesus talked to that woman like that. I thought that he was just born perfect. Like, that's what I learned in church, that he just showed up and he was full of grace and mercy and wisdom, and he didn't have to learn anything." So, this morning's passage is probably not a passage that some of us grew up learning in Sunday school, though I can tell you I've preached on it a few times. I think it is the most delightful passage, and although I honestly don't repurpose my sermons, the sermon I wrote a number of years based on this passage keeps getting rewritten because I think the message is always new. It is recorded in the second chapter of John, and I hope you appreciated Missing Commandment, "Thou shalt not party," is based on this particular passage. Oh, thou shalt party. Did I say thou shalt not? Yes. Oh my goodness, what a Freudian slip that is. Oh, I'm really embarrassed now. Thou shalt party, got it. Sure says something about my roots, doesn't it? My roots are showing. Yeah. Oh, my word. Okay, so here we are. There was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there, and Jesus and the disciples had also been invited. When they ran out of wine, since the wine provided for the wedding was all finished, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said, "Woman, why do you turn to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." There were 6 stone water jars standing there, meant for the ablutions that are customary among the Jews. Each could hold 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them to the brim. "Draw some out now," Jesus told them, "and take it to the steward." They did this. The steward tasted the water, and it had turned into wine. Having no idea where it came from, only the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said, "People generally serve the best wine first and keep the cheaper sort till the guests have had plenty to drink. But you have kept the best till now." This was the first of the signs given by Jesus. It was given at Cana in Galilee. Jesus let his glory be seen, and the disciples believed in him. Years ago, while I was still in university, I had a roommate whose name was Glenna, who was notorious for her parties. Most every weekend, the wine and the food flowed in abundance. A few years later, after we'd both graduated and gone our separate ways, she called me from her home in Saskatchewan and asked if I would preside over her wedding. I was planning to make the trip back to visit my family in Saskatchewan that summer, so I gladly agreed. It turned out that the wedding was to take place in her mother's home, another woman famous for her hospitality, who lived in Moose Jaw. So I arrived on the bus in Moose Jaw day before the wedding, and Glenna's brother picked me up. I quizzed him about the party because I knew it would be grand. "Where were they holding the banquet?" I asked. Well, it turns out that her parents had built an addition onto the house for the occasion. And I thought to myself, gee, that's some addition. And, well, what about the dance? I asked. I knew there was going to be a dance. Oh, yeah, sure, he said, there's going to be a dance. And where was that going to be? I asked. In the addition, he said. Well, it was quite an addition, a huge room with a cathedral ceiling, with a bar that would make any establishment proud. But the Barbers, they loved a party. And I always think about them when I read the story of the wedding at Cana. I mean, really, what kind of extravagance is that? Building an addition the same size of your house just so that you can host parties. That's so not in keeping with my roots. But according to John, the first miracle that Jesus performs is equally extravagant. It is a wedding banquet, and people have been partying for a while because the wine has run out. And this was a household of means because while there were because of all of the servants, as well as a wine steward. In response to the cries, Jesus directs the servants to fill 6 stone pots used by the Jews for the ritual washing with water. Pots that represented the purity laws. Pots that, if you went deep down inside of them, would have said, religious, pure, no fun here. And he proceeds to turn the water in the pots, says the story, into the finest wine. Now, there's all kinds of stuff happening here. This is, after all, John, okay? John is the prince of symbolism. He is the master of epiphany. John wants his audience to read the signs. Now, sometimes they're really convoluted, and you have to have a deep understanding of the context and the culture in order to decipher them. And most times there are at least 2 layers of meaning. But let's just begin by doing the math, all right? We've got 6 jugs of water, each of them holding 20 to 30 gallons, and this water is transformed into great wine. So let's average it out and say that we have, 6 times 25 is 150 gallons of wine. Now, your average bottle of wine is about a liter. So this means that about 600 bottles of wine show up at this banquet, after everyone has probably already had more than enough. And it's good stuff, even though by now many of the guests could probably no longer distinguish between good wine and bad vinegar. So now that we've done the math, let's just think about the literal meaning of the passage. It's not meant to be read that way, of course, but let's consider it. It's simple, really. It's the party will go on. That's all that happened. The party went on. Now, of course, this has all kinds of social implications. The hosts will not be ashamed. The guests will not be disappointed. The bride and groom will not be remembered for their wedding and their embarrassment. The party went on. I wonder what that might mean for you right now that we're talking about Jesus and a party and a whole lot of wine. Because this miracle that Jesus performs, and if John makes it the first miracle, then that's a sign for John that it's a super significant miracle. Well, it's about making sure the party will go on. The joy will go on. The laughter will go on. The fellowship will go on. The belonging will go on. A colleague of mine I talked to last week, and he said he preached on this passage the weekend before. And this would have been a new revelation for him. And it is the way he explained it. It was, he said, Lynn, he goes, I really just figured it out. Like, it didn't have anything to go with going to church, and it didn't have anything to do with the creed, and it didn't have anything to do with thinking of yourself as good or bad or otherwise. He goes, That miracle was all about celebrating a healthy community out there. Well, we've known that for a long time, haven't we? So look, this is John's story, and he was the latest to write his gospel, probably about 90 years after Jesus has died. His material is very different than the material prepared by the other three gospel writers. And he's making a massive statement by making this story the first event of Jesus' public ministry after Jesus called his disciples. Jesus is like new wine, he suggests. Jesus is the door to experiencing life in a new way. The religious life was not meant to be a burden, and it had become a burden, but was meant to be a window to joy and celebration. And I think it's a miracle or a story or a myth that is intended to shatter those prisons of perception that I referred to earlier. Yes, you can describe your life as full of loneliness and loss. Yes, you could describe your life as full of hopelessness and anxiety. But John is saying that if you connect yourself to this larger mystery that is mediated in Jesus, then you create another world, a place where there is abundance and joy, and always a place for us to belong, and always room for us at the table. I think that the story of water into wine is a parable of life. It is an invitation to anticipate abundance. It is an invitation to remember that regardless of where we find ourselves, that our true home is at the party, in the community of the Spirit, with everyone. It is an invitation to make joy the standard and to recognize that joy is God's ultimate gift to us. I brought out this old sermon because I know that a lot of you are living with anxiety for all kinds of reasons. And I think it's time to take our perception back. Our perception is our task. And I think that very often, issues around mental health, depression, anxiety, we know they're incredibly complex. But we also know they have a great deal to do with perception. So John is saying, open your eyes to the mystery. Trust that the best things in life cannot be explained. Water into wine, it's a mystery. Falling in love, it's a mystery. Watching a seed become a vegetable or a flower, it's a delicious mystery. And it's meant, life is meant to be enjoyed. So I invite you now, in whatever way would be meaningful to you, to invite Jesus to your perception. To imagine your life with Jesus, who insists the party will go on, to be present. To open your eyes and your heart to the possibility of gifts formerly incomprehensible to you. I think finally what John is saying is that we have to do the work. It's our job to heal our own perception. It's our job to determine that our day-to-day lives, our waking and our sleeping, will not be ruled by the evening news. It's our job to be those who reclaim joy, abundance, and possibilities. That is the invitation of this miracle in our tradition. We have work to do.